Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, February 17th, 2020, and I'm the host of the show, Cara Santa Maria. I had an incredible time last week. I was out of town, you may have noticed. You may not have noticed, because I don't know if I talked about it on the show, but I got to travel all the way to Kazakhstan to go to the Baikonur Cosmodrome where the Soyuz takes off. And I saw a launch for OneWeb, which is a company that is, their goal is to put up a satellite constellation to provide global internet. It was an incredible opportunity, and we're actually going to talk about it next week or the week after on the show. But this week, I have a really, really exciting show for you. But before I tell you all about it, I want to thank those of you who have made Talk Nerdy possible. Remember, Talk Nerdyism will always be 100% free to download, and that's because of the listener support from people just like you. If you want to support the show, all you've got to do is go to patreon.com/talknerdy, and you can learn more. This week's top patrons include Michael Gaucher, Mary Neva, Pasquale Gelate, Sinai, Ulrika Hagman, Dudas Infinitas, Phil T-Bear, The Zombie Drummer, David J.E. Smith, and Brian Holden. Thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. It really means a lot to me that you continue to support the show week after week after week after week after week. There are other ways to support the show. You can visit talknerdymerch.com and, buy some Talk Nerdy merch. All of those proceeds go to support the show. And tell your friends and family about it. Rate, review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the places that you listen to podcasts. That's all super, super, super helpful. Okay, enough business. Let's get into the show. Ooh, this is a good one. I got to do an in-person interview with an LA-based magician named Kayla Drescher. Now, she's a professional magician who does a lot of different events, and you can hire her if you want her to do one of your events. She's also on tour currently with the Champions of Magic, and she is one half of the podcasting team of the Shezam podcast. And of course, that's Shezam, which is a feminist podcast all about magic. So lots of cool stuff. We covered lots of ground. And oh my gosh, I learned so much. I'm totally a magic nerd. I wonder if you guys are too. Maybe you will be after you listen to this episode. So yeah, guys, without any further ado, here she is, Kayla Drescher. Well, Kayla, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Of course. Okay, so it's really fun to do this in person. I always say that when I do them in person because it's getting, sadly, increasingly more common that I'm recording remotely with people. I think just because everybody's busy and everybody lives really far away. But you live in LA.
Yeah, hey.
And even though we're both busy, we both found time, which is cool.
I'm so happy. Also, it took me 20 minutes to get here, which is an outrageously...
Where do you live?
North Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
But it's such a short amount of time to travel 8 miles in Los Angeles.
That sounds to people, they're like, wait, what?
But that's so long.
Yeah, no, that's really short.
I was very happy.
That's amazing. And it makes me happy. Yeah, maybe you think it's because we picked like a random time of day, it was like just post rush hour?
Whatever it is, I'm just happy it happened. But yeah, it's noon, so that was helpful.
True. And I am still caffeinating because I'm very jet lagged from the rocket launch that I attended. It was very cool. I woke up at 5 this morning, and then I fell back asleep on the couch. And then I woke up like 20 minutes before you got here. So
that's great. Yeah.
Hello.
I have been up for more than you and did not come back from a different country, but I'm also caffeinating, so I'm with you. Excuse the sip.
It's a good sip.
All right, we're ready. Thank you.
I have to know then, as a magician, are there like magic hours? Like, do you stay up really late and sleep in a lot because you're constantly performing at night? Or is that like a weird stereotype that I'm assuming is true, which is not?
No, you're not wrong. For my personal schedule, I'm not a morning person at all. So getting up before at least 9 a.m. So it throws me off, and then I'm exhausted for the rest of the day. So I'm definitely an evening person. Most of my productivity comes from 6 p.m. and onwards.
Yeah.
So I get really excited about that. But also, shows are very rarely before 2 p.m. On occasion, you might get a company calling you for like a lunchtime show for their employees, but that's rare. And then I'm in a tour, so traveling over half the year, all in every time zone imaginable, really. That's not quite true, but that's what it feels like, is, you just learn to sort of get up when you're supposed to, and then you go to sleep when you're supposed to, and you don't actually know what time it is or what time it is for your body or what you're used to. So jet lag ends up becoming a really weird thing when you get accustomed to just sort of existing in whatever is necessary. Then the jet lag is just getting back to a schedule as opposed to going, what time was it for me? It's just going, I don't know anymore. I don't know where I am most days. There are occasionally I've walked into a Starbucks going, can you tell me where I am? What state and city, please?
Because they all look the same.
They do, though, especially when you're like, are we in Idaho or Iowa? It's one of them. And I don't remember which. So yeah, no, it's you're right. It could, just because shows are mainly in the evening, it's not unlike the industry to get a call for a show that would begin at midnight. So
wow, really?
That happens, yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
And so you're on tour right now, but the other kind of side of doing magic and is it safe to assume, or is it fair to guess that the other side of doing magic is that most of the bread and butter comes from like corporate gigs?
Yeah, I'm of a rare lucky few that get to be in a theater show. That's almost non-existent in the industry. There is more and more now, but it is very rare that that's a thing. So yeah, a lot of my work outside of the tour comes from corporate. I was doing colleges for a while, which is a really great industry to be a part of. But yeah, corporate's the main guy, especially in LA.
Yeah, because they have the money, right?
Absolutely, yep. And San Diego is really big for corporate stuff too. So I've done a bunch down there. So just sort of in and around Southern California, it's a pretty big corporate market.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically you keep a calendar, you get booked for gigs, you do is it a standard show? Do you adapt it depending on what the gig is? Or does your show just kind of evolve over time until eventually all the old pieces have been replaced by new pieces?
All of the above.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sometimes, for the most part, a magic show especially, is much like stand-up comedy, where it just takes forever to get one sentence exactly right. Most of my show is also comedy-based, so I have that added difficulty and added thing to learn and evolve. Yeah, you're right, is that slowly things will go away and new pieces will get worked in. A piece could last for 5 years or 20. You kind of never know. You just sort of play it out, see if it's still working. But a lot of corporate companies will call and ask for a customized show. And if there's a budget, because that takes a really long time. I also really try to learn the product inside and out, almost like I work for that company, especially if I'm going to do a trade show, because basically you're sitting in this booth trying to get people to come into the booth, and then people are asking you questions about the product and the company, and you better have those answers, at least on the surface level. When I worked for this amazing cybersecurity company, but I didn't understand any of the in-depth coding. So I could answer all the questions, and they would ask me some question, and I go, I have no idea, but let me push you to this person.
Yeah.
He knows all. So you just try to get it as much as you can, but that requires a lot of time and dedication to learning. So if a company has sort of the budget to allow for that, I love doing customized shows, because you never know. You get to learn a new thing, and then get to help promote whatever they want to sell, which is really cool.
It's so cool. Magic as an industry. I'm wondering, probably what percentage of people who would literally consider themselves magicians, who would feel confident or competent maybe to say, I'm a magician. What percentage of those people have the sort of privilege and have busted their ass long enough and have taken all the risks and, have been lucky enough to say, okay, this is my full-time gig. This isn't just my thing that I do at night or on the weekends and I have a day job, know?
It's weird, because magic is sort of one of those things that people will consider themselves a magician before they should.
Gotcha. Yep,
they know 3 tricks, and then they go, I'm a magician, I will do all the work. And then there's also there are so many different levels within magic in terms of how much you do it. So there's obviously the amateurs and the hobbyists, and then you have the semi-professionals. I have a lot of friends who are teachers or lawyers, doctors, and then they do magic on the weekends. But those guys are usually incredibly talented. So it's hard to say I can't count the weekend magicians as professionals because they are actually very, very, very good. And then you have the pros who that's their source of income. So it's kind of hard to really measure it out because it's very easy to self-title yourself as a magician. It's sort of the same, excuse me, as I would imagine if you take one art class, suddenly you're a painter.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's kind of the same level.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people who, because magic is one of those things that not everybody, you have to be trained or you have to, learn it. You have to practice. It's not like a natural kind of like, oh, I just know how to do this off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So once you learn it and you're trained and you know one thing, you're like, oh, look, I do magic. And it's
People
like, no,
think
you do one
magic-
magic trick.
Right. That's exactly right. People think magic is so easy. It's just you just learn how to do it and then you do it. And it is so hard. It's also like for science and psychology friends listening is that's all magic is. And so you better know what you're doing in order for it to look good. And you end up watching really bad magic 80% of the time because people genuinely don't know what goes into just one tiny moment. And all you need to do is like take a back up. You need to take one step back and you've solved a problem. And you just have no idea that that's necessary unless you've put in a lot of time and effort and learned all the ins and outs. But yeah, I think magic is incredibly difficult because of everything that goes into it. And you need to know science, you need to know psychology, you need to know painting, you need to know woodworking, you need to know comedy, you need to know how to hold a microphone. There's just so much that goes into it. And that's how you, I think, separate the professional from the non-professional.
Yeah, it seems like there's probably a disconnect for a lot of people who have either never really, like magic is just a concept to them, or maybe they've seen one magic show once, or they think of it as more like a kid's birthday party kind of thing. Because they've never actually like gone to a professional magic show. And I wonder if there's this disconnect where a lot of people don't realize that, like you said, just like comedy, or let's say like, what would be another example? Maybe like a performance, like a performing arts thing, like ballet or something like that, and that's actually not a good example. So I'm going to stick with comedy, where it's not just what you're doing on stage, it's all the prep to go on stage. Like you developed that routine.
Yeah.
And not only did you script it and have to rehearse all of the scripting to make sure all the timing is right and blah, blah, blah. You actually invented or at least iterated the tricks themselves. And you have to practice pulling them off in such a way that nobody can see the trick.
Yeah.
That they think you did it magically.
Yes. So the way I try to describe magic to people who are learning it is that an audience will be watching a trick, and say you have like a sort of a spectrum, and on one side of the spectrum, let's just say it's 10, you score it 0 to 10. And on the 10, that's real magic. I have absolutely no idea how it was done. And I will just concede this person went to Hogwarts.
Yeah,
and then
like this is like supernatural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And although that's not ever the truth behind, at least for me, and I think for ideally most magicians, is we're never going to actually claim we have superpower.
Although I have met people who do, and I find that really unethical.
Very annoying. Yeah. I don't like any of them.
Yeah, where people are like, I'm literally reading your mind. And I'm like, so you're like a psychic? You're like a cold reader? Like, gross.
But you're not.
I know, you're not. It's tricks.
It's all, it's so, anyway, yes. I mean, we could go on that. That's a different podcast.
Next week on The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. No, that's
more
true.
Magic. I love it. So what were we even talking about? So it's a spectrum of 10 to 0. So 10 is supernatural powers and 0 is, I get it.
No, like I'm watching you do the trick.
Exactly.
You dropped it and yeah,
like I could do that right now because I just saw everything. Obviously, the goal is to get to the 10 for the moment of suspended disbelief. And so if you are reaching for that 10, but then there's a moment, it could be just very brief, where something isn't clear. Yeah. Or there's a flash of method or something just doesn't it's not validated really. It doesn't feel organic in the moment. Like organic, the feeling of it being normal and organic is very important.
Which is probably the hardest thing because
Yep.
nothing is.
Yep.
Everything is rehearsed and kind of clumsy at first. And,
Yes.
But then you have to make it look like you're not even trying.
Exactly. And especially if I do a secret move with a deck of cards, it shouldn't feel like I've just done something.
Yeah.
And although the audience might not backtrack, they might not remember that later, what it does is it ticks you down a point.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of it being a 10, now you're down to a 9. And then maybe there was a moment where you looked at your hands too long and the audience was like, why are you doing that? They forgot about it, but that ticked you down a moment. So then all of a sudden you're instead of it being a 10, you're down to a 7 or an 8. And then the audience is looking at it going, that was fun. That was really good. And they just won't remember it because it wasn't that 10.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of ways that you can get to a 10. Sometimes it's not the most magical thing, but it's more entertaining or funny. And so you can do that too. But it's sort of about trying to make sure you're always at that end of the spectrum, making sure that people genuinely believe something really amazing just happened and I don't know what it was, but I love it. That's what you go for.
And it does seem like it's probably a combination of, like you said, different functions, different features. Like you could be like an insanely funny, insanely personable, like really entertaining person on stage who actually doesn't do that many wows or tricks, but people are like, that was one of the best magic shows I've ever seen. And then on the flip side of that, like even recently, I feel like I was at a magic show where everybody was like oohing and awing about how talented this like young up and coming magician was because he was like really technically talented, but I was like bored out of my skull watching him because I was like, oh, the ball changed colors again. Oh, the card changed colors again. Because it just, and I get that all of the like inside baseball people there were like, how did he look at this? Oh my God, his sleight of hand. But I was like, yeah, but it's boring. Yeah. Like, so it does have to be all of it, right?
Oh, 100%. Also, the test that I always give is don't actually say it, but do you remember that kid's name?
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, chances are most of the people who even thought that moment was really amazing aren't going to remember who that person was or even what they really look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, again, an issue is that if they can't remember, you know, I'm not saying the audience leaves and goes, I love Kayla, Kayla, Kayla. But what they might do is go, I remember that really specific thing that she's doing and no one else is doing. And then someone else will go, oh yeah, that was Kayla.
Yeah.
So I want there to be something that the audience can latch on to where it's super different. Only I'm doing it. There's no, you know, you're not going to mistake me for somebody else. Also, we were kind of talking before about how the American School of Magic is very focused on technique and it being very pretty. And if you put a camera just on somebody's hands, that it's very impressive. But then when you kind of pan out, you lose interest because it's all the hand stuff and not really performance-based. And we're sort of we're not the only school of magic. School of Magic is very based on geographical location. So we're not the only school of magic that focuses on technique, but we're the only one that really doesn't care about the validity of what's going on and how entertaining it is. There are plenty of magicians that went technique and entertainment. Those guys are heroes and amazing. But for the most part, the American School of Magic, especially here in LA, is pretty technique-based.
Which is funny because it's like, it's Hollywood. Yeah. You know what I mean? You would think that people would understand that like it's all about the act and the costuming and the choreography and like you've got to like have all of it in order to really impress somebody. But
it's because magic is so inherently amazing. So as long as you're like on that scale, if you're a 3 or above, in that moment, the audience thinks you're amazing.
Yeah.
Most magicians don't think about the after thought process. They go, no, I'm amazing. The audience said I'm amazing. Do you know what I had an audience that member, she told me I should be doing a show in Vegas. I'm just saying I should be now. That's where I'm going to go. And you realize that like, no, actually you got a 3 out of 10 and no one will remember you. And here's why.
Yeah.
And it could be your costume. It could be, you know, that you weren't funny. It could be you were creepy. A lot of creepy magicians.
Yes, we're so going to talk about that.
I can't wait. Oh, I can't wait. So excited. So yeah, it ends up being, even though you're in Hollywood, magic, because it's it breeds laziness. It allows for complacency. It allows for just saying, oh, this trick was cool, and I can just leave it at that. Very few magicians will train in another performance form or in another art form. That was something I didn't think I needed to do until I moved to LA. I thought I was doing great. And then I realized, oh, I'm not funny. And I thought I was funny. I should probably study comedy. So then I did that. And so you just sort of try to figure out what else you want to add to magic. But because it's so inherently amazing, most magicians are fine existing there.
And it makes me wonder if there is like this component of, I don't think laziness is the right word, but this component of like the complacency that comes from privilege. So like, magic is inherently amazing. People go, holy shit, how did you do that? And so right there, you have that kind of ego boost. But on top of that, magic is also very white and it's very male. And it's like all of these things that, and again, just as a refresher, when we talk about privilege on the show, we're not saying that people with privilege don't ever have hardships. We're just saying that they don't have hardships simply by virtue of, you know, the thing that like outwardly defines them, right? So white men doing magic all of the time, you are a woman in magic, which historically, most of the women that I think of in magic are not magicians. They're what did they call it? The sidekick?
The assistant.
The assistant, yes. And they're wearing, you know, the outfit and they're acting stupid. Why do they act stupid?
Because it was the role was written by a guy.
But why did he think that was interesting or attractive?
I think you can watch one episode of I Love Lucy and think it's a good idea without understanding why her naiveness. Is that a word?
Sure.
Why not?
I like it.
Made it up for today. Her naiveness worked.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a pretty big thing. I mean, Gracie Burns was sort of the same thing, or Gracie Allen and George Burns. Gracie and George Burns. That's the sentence I wanted to say. Another example, without understanding why her, you know, in a sense, dumbness was funny. Rose Nyland on Golden Girls. Like, I'm just listing things that people see. Oh, dumb women are funny, as opposed to going, why are they funny? We need to we need to understand the backing there. Why does that work? And so it's really easy to just write a dumb female role and call it a day. Because also a dumb woman can't compete with the magical man.
Well, and I think that, that really, that resonates, right? This idea that I'm a guy and I'm a magician and I need somebody to hold my bag and I need somebody that I can saw in half. So I'm going to make sure she's hot, has big boobs, is completely deferent to me and like is basically oohing and awing over me, because then maybe the audience will feel the same way, although they don't realize that that's like a recipe for backfiring. And then also, it's going to make me feel big and strong and proud of myself by comparison, which is so gross. And the weird thing is I've seen shows like this year that still had a dumb female assistant. And their whole thing was like they were trying to be like more progressive. So she would like have these pat kind of like quotes, these things that she would say that made her seem like a strong female character, but then she was just like completely in the same gender role. And I was like, obviously you don't get it. Like it was like lip service to like feminism. It was so gross.
I can't agree with you more. That's just it's a thing. It's also like there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, of having a female assistant. I don't think there's, if that's the aesthetic that you want to have, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But also, I think she needs to also be a person. So we, I don't know where this actually came from. Somebody sent it to us. I'm not sure who actually created it, but there's a thing we use called the lamp test, which is, can your assistant be replaced by a lamp?
That's a very low bar.
You would be surprised.
Wow.
How, from the audience's perspective as well. So not so much the method. Obviously, if you're an assistant and you go in a box, you're doing some movement that's in the box for to make the magic work. But from the audience's perspective, could you put a lamp in a box, cut it in half, and then bring it back out and it's together again?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, right? But if you, like, I don't know about you, I don't name my lamps.
Yeah.
So you could give your assistant, like, mention
name.
their name.
Yeah.
Be nice.
It's like a minimal.
It's just a really good start. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised how many magicians have told me they don't think it's necessary just to give their assistant a name at the top of the show, not during the bows as well. Like, immediately they come out and you say, oh, thank you, insert name.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Lots of magicians do not think that's a necessity. It is not a very large gesture, but you'd be surprised, I think, what would actually happen.
Yeah, how much it like humanizes her and like
Exactly.
gives her a personality.
Yeah.
It's
Pretty
just
simple.
Yeah, it's just so weird that you would not want your assistant to have a personality. Like, you have a whole feature here. It's like a living, breathing human being with a frontal cortex who can like contribute to your show. But instead you're like, oh, I'll just use her as furniture?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. Or just like a dumb thing like a dumb punching bag, right?
Yeah.
That happens too. So, as we talked about. So, yeah, I get that the powerful magician with a sexy female assistant is an aesthetic that's existed a long time.
Mhm.
I'd love for that to go away, but I think it's going to be a while before that happens. Regardless, I think there are ways that we can work around that her just being a prop.
Yeah, like that dynamic can still exist, but be redefined in a way that's like kind of woke.
Mhm.
Like, you can actually use it for social commentary, and you can use it but
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder how many people are. I mean, hopefully there are people doing that who are like, oh, obviously this is gross. Let's keep it, the dynamic, and then like use it to point out how gross it is while also doing magic.
Yes, exactly. There's a magician, his name's Alex Ramon, and I really like Alex. I think he's amazing, and his assistant, from the moment she walks on the stage, name, personality. She's never speaking into a mic, but he's giving her all of the credit. Like, she's doing all of the hard work in this moment. And you go, yes, okay, cool. Thank you.
Oh, that's true, because she is doing a lot of technique. And like you said, like when you saw her in Half in the Box, like she's like moving her body in ways that like people shouldn't be able to move their bodies.
Exactly right. And then the magician points at it and gets all the applause.
You're so right.
Like, what is this relationship that exists? As opposed to if you go, she's amazing, here's her personality, here's no understanding she's a human being, and then going forth with it. I don't think there's less wrong with that. I'd love to get away from the idea of female mutilation.
You're so right. And that's another thing where I feel like there's got to be a way to redefine even classic tricks, where instead of it coming across like murder or mutilation, you could even still somehow do the same like mechanism, but basically frame it differently. There's got to be ways to do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, just as like a fun fact to mention in this conversation is that the first time a woman was sawed in half, the first time a woman was put into a saw in half box was during the women's suffrage movement. So there was all of a sudden this like weird combating women gaining equality with women getting put in a box and mutilated and, not having power during a performance.
Yeah.
So when you look at it like that, you go, oh yeah, okay, something is wrong here where this is still a thing. My favorite magicians are Mark and Ginger Kalin, and they do a saw in half where Ginger gets sawed in half. But Ginger has complete and utter control over everything that happens. So she's giving instruction. I mean, they're both giving instruction, but she is letting them know, like, nope, I'm in this. You hold my feet. You hold this part. Boxes go on. I'm sawed in half, and I'm amazing.
Yeah.
Mark, in that sense, is her assistant in a lot of ways. So she's doing most of the talking, and she has the power in that situation. She's just showing her skill. So it doesn't feel so much like she's being mutilated by a guy.
Yeah.
It feels like she wants to do this. There's also a magician in the UK. She does it similarly, where she goes in the box and then instructs two guys to put blades in and then move the boxes around. And you're like, wow, that's so cool. Because it's still doing as like initial dancers who have then become magicians. They have that power to move their bodies in ways that I can't do.
Yeah.
So why not use that? As long as on stage it's like, oh, they're consenting to this moment.
It's almost like the kind of circus contortionist, like there is a way to do, or like even ballet, right? There's a way to be very progressive and take ownership and like, look at this amazing thing that I can do with my body. Look at how much I've trained and now I want to perform for you, as opposed to this more like oppressive, subjugated, like I'm being forced to do this, or I'm, like just a cog in a wheel that like is, look at all of the women doing all the hard work, right? And you see a pretty picture, but like they're faceless and nameless.
Yeah.
Which is historically just kind of what we've been dealing with. But you're a magician. Like you yourself are a magician. I almost said woman magician. And I was like, what am I doing? Gross. I hate it when people talk about like woman scientists. Like, what am I doing?
Thank you.
But I was going to say that because as opposed to what we've been talking about, which is an assistant or the male magician, right? So you're a magician who, do you work alone usually? Okay, yeah. So how common is that?
So per various studies, there's a cultural anthology thing that got released saying how many women are in various industries. And so per that, they estimate 2 to 5% of magicians are women.
Geez. So this is like this is like the last kind of frontier of, we talk all the time about representation in STEM and representation in Hollywood and women directors and women camera operators and women physicists and women computer scientists and magicians. That's like the worst. That's the worst I've heard.
It's almost the worst. Poker is worse.
Really? Poker's worse?
Poker's 2%.
Interesting. Okay.
Or at least from 2019 numbers.
I love poker.
I know. It's
so fun.
It's great.
It's my favorite. You should come play in my poker game.
I mean, I don't know how to play, but
my God, you'd be amazing because you're a magician.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Like you don't even have
cheat?
to. Well, poker is basically, bluffing is cheating in a way. You can't like actually cheat as in you shouldn't mark cards or like, or like sleight of hand card.
That's fine. But I can like.
But honestly, if you're good at, which you are good enough that you could just do that, I feel like you've kind of earned the ability to have 6 aces.
I mean, if I don't get caught, right?
Exactly.
That's the whole game.
Yeah. I mean, everything else about poker is kind of, it's like mentalism magic.
Very much. Yeah.
I have, look. Oh, where
are you pointing?
There. I'm pointing to my stack of poker books on my
That's so my great. I love that you have a stack of this. You have 8 poker books in one stack underneath a shell.
Yeah.
I'm really
underneath
happy.
A little shell from somewhere.
See, I thought I was weird because I owned a how to play backgammon book.
I don't know how to play backgammon. Okay, I'll teach you poker. You teach me backgammon.
I'm in. Absolutely. I can't wait. You'll love backgammon. You will love it. Okay,
cool.
First of all, I'm 80. And second of all, you'll love it. It's very addicting.
Amazing.
Can't wait. What fun. Okay,
so
anyway,
you have to then, because probably if it's 2% of magicians, or 2% of magicians are women and 2% of poker players are women, then if you're a poker playing magician who is a woman, then you're like down to like
beat the
0.01%. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. You've got to do that. Yeah.
It'll be fun to be the ultimate minority in an industry, wouldn't it? Great.
Okay.
News.
So as it is, you're surrounded by dudes all the time.
Sure.
Although the cool thing and probably also the hard thing about magic, I'm going to assume, maybe I'm wrong here, that like what sometimes I do in television where you're like the on-camera person, you weirdly actually don't ever meet other people who do what you do because they're off doing their thing.
Right.
So like if I'm on a show with multiple correspondents, people are like, what was it like working with so-and-so? And you're like, I don't know. I never saw them. Like it was just me out there because they were out there doing their thing.
Yep.
So like
it's pretty similar.
Yeah. Unless you're at a show with multiple, I guess, time slots.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a show with 4 other magicians.
Right, because you're the touring show.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Which is great because we all come from different expertise backgrounds. And so we can really help each other out and bring new perspectives to each other, which is really great. I'm very lucky to be a part of like a good think tank of people. Also,
Yeah.
a producer is the guy who owns the show is really passionate about magic, and he sees magic in a really cool way where he's not a magic performer, but he understands how things work. So the people that come together to do everything. There is also an assistant in the show. She does aerial silks in the show as well. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
And then she's part of like a magic parody bit that
Nice.
our illusionists do. And she also has a cool perspective that she brings from a dancer and performer's perspective, but also
I love that.
now just getting into magic, which is awesome. But yeah, so it's rare that the people that you want to be hanging out with, so the other people who get what it's like to be professional magicians and not what I so lovingly refer to as the magic masturbators. They're just like, they're just, ah, ha, 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 look at how great I am. And you
Please date me.
Yeah. All the time.
I love the concept that these guys learn magic to attract women, as if that ever in the history of the world is something that women are attracted to. It makes me laugh so hard when I go to the castle and I'm like, this is like anti-attractive. Like, you realize that, right? Like, your crushed velvet suit is not working for me.
Wow, I can name like 6 people who you're talking about. That's great. Your crushed velvet suit. You're so right. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it work, unfortunately.
That's so sad. But also, like, what caliber of like partner?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, you have a good time and then don't see them again type of caliber.
And I feel like, is there like a type, like a magic groupie type?
Oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, Lord. There are a lot of those.
That's amazing.
There are so many. I can't. It's fine.
Yeah, it's
I
fine.
know.
To each their own, honestly. Yeah. No judgment there. I mean, if somebody's into it, they're into it. It just makes me sad that there's this, it feels a little bit incel-y. Like that there's almost this thing of like, I haven't been able to like land what I want and own what I want, so I'm going to use this new avenue to do so. There's got to be at least some percentage of people who fall into that group.
100%. Yeah. There's also, so I think there are plenty of people who I've met who have like met their partners, and the story is he showed me a magic trick and I was invested, and you're like, okay,
yeah, cool.
Yeah. But then there's also substance there, right? There's like more to connect with and whatever. Where there's a line, which is I'm going to use this magic to get a phone number.
Yeah.
I have seen tricks be used to get a kiss from an audience member.
So it's like coercion.
Really it's really uncomfortable. I don't like that. It's basically, this trick only works if you kiss me right now.
Ew.
And of course, as you're freaking out as a volunteer, you don't know. So you're just like, oh yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, because you're on stage. Like, that's so much pressure.
Yes. It's like, also the lights are blinding you. Yeah. He's the only person you can see. It's all wrong. So yeah, magicians are gross. So that is problematic. I do wonder, and I might ask everyone I know if any of the women I know have ever used magic to pick up a guy, because that would be pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's not a number that I know.
And weirdly, it almost seems like it would also work.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Totally.
But also, how often do you deal with, because this is something we deal with a lot, like in science TV, in like anytime you take science and then you merge it with some sort of like public kind of entertainment or like communication aspect, where it's like, you're so pretty and smart, you know? So like, how often is it like, oh, you're a chick, like you got boobs and you can do the magic?
Yep.
Like, gross.
I mean, a magic convention is a great place to experience that. We call them convention goggles. It's just like, in the grand scheme of things, if I walked down the streets of Los Angeles, I am the not attractive per se, comparatively to other women that are around, right? And that's totally fine. Like, I'm saying nothing against myself.
This is not 100% true, but I see what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
because
like,
especially because in LA,
correct,
everybody, the
models,
caliber of
actors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I totally get it. Walking through LAX, so you just walk through and you're like, am I in a magazine?
I know, it's ridiculous.
All of you are beautiful on the outside.
Yeah, and like also, I don't wear makeup every day, and I'm like in my schlumpy jeans and
exactly right. Yeah. Like, I don't try, but that's besides the point.
Same.
Yep, I love it. Yeah. But also, when you go to a magic convention, I could not try, but I'm one of 3 women that are there. So convention goggles on, immediately hit on. The other thing happens a lot in corporate events because so many corporate companies are dominated by men.
Yeah.
Especially when you have an event. Well, I used to live in Vegas, and that was just hit on me central because that was the same as like I'm walking around. I have tried. I look nice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm
'cause it's a
doing magic.
gig.
Exactly. I mean, constantly hit on. I can't tell you how many CEOs have invited me up to their room. I didn't
Yeah.
partake, but also to each their own. You could have if you so wanted.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But
Just
at
not
what
my
point is
game.
that like, yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
That's hard because it's like 80% of the room is dudes because
Sure.
these are all upper level executives and
Yeah.
ugh, gross.
I've oddly never really had like I don't mind the proposition. I mean, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, no, but thank you. And then it gets left at that. I've never had in a corporate setting anything really uncomfortable happen where
That's
I've had
good.
to like say anything or at least not that I can recall. Maybe there was a thing or two, but I just kind of fluffed it off and kept going. But I can't remember, at least in the last 6 years, where anything's happened that that I felt really not okay about it.
But you
Magic
can
community is a
imagine.
different game. It's terrible.
Yeah. And you can
But
imagine like a young kind of up and coming magician who feels sort of pressure to make the client happy or to make the booker happy or to,
absolutely.
and kind of we all know how that kind of ends up, which
For
is
sure.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then same as within your own industry as well, and that happens in all of the industries. Is that there's just pressure from somebody that you admire to, and they all of a sudden want to help you, and you're a young woman, and that feels like it's a logical trade-off. I guess
Mhm.
it's not. I had my hero in the world. Her name was Celeste Evans. She was this amazing magician that performed mainly in the 50s, 60s
Cool.
era.
Yeah.
So there was really no women. I mean, it hasn't gotten all that much in terms of numbers. It's gotten a bit better in terms of community and language and things, but in terms of percentage, not really.
Yeah.
And she was just this badass woman who performed her act. And then all of a sudden they offered her, like, you could come do this European tour, but you need to do 20 minutes instead of 8. So she just made 20 minutes and then went and did a European tour. And she was just amazing. She was on television and just was awesome. And I remember I was 15 years old. I had known Celeste for a bit at this point, and she just came up to me and genuinely said, listen, I know you want to maybe be a professional. I'm just going to tell you something. I sucked every dick. And you're just like, oh, excuse my language. I'm just going to say it. I sucked
Amazing.
every dick to get on television. And I'm just letting you know you don't need to do any of that.
Oh,
It was my
shit.
choice.
Yeah.
And I did it. But you don't do that if you don't want to. And I was like, I'm 15. I didn't
the world is
understand
very
this
real to me all of a
conversation.
sudden.
She was just so bad. And the fact that she felt the necessity to go, hey, young woman, you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
Don't feel that pressure. I think was incredibly important for me because I don't know, I can't say that without that, along with other people and women in the industry that have inspired me to not have to sell myself, rather sell the product of the act, is that I don't know I would still be here.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, the amount of times I've been offered an opportunity for the trade-off, it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that. And I think knowing that I don't have to do that is really helpful. But also, how would you know that unless somebody actually told you?
That's true. And how bold, how strong to be able to say something like that, because the only way that you can really tell somebody else is to be confident enough in your own self to admit some of the experiences that you've had in your life, So that's like a big sacrifice that she made to be able to say that to you.
Yeah, big time. I was very thankful for her. I wear her daughter kindly sent me when Celeste passed away, her jewelry. So now every show I wear her jewelry.
Oh my God, that's
as
amazing.
Like a little tiny reminder that I can also be a badass.
Yeah.
Which is great.
And kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like these women who really paved the way.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad to see that. I mean, it's good to see that things culturally have improved significantly. Obviously, there's still a lot
but
to happen. But the fact that you can be a woke magician and still book,
Yeah.
gigs.
Yeah.
But it's also very disheartening to see that there's just not been space made. I mean, do you think that it's because they're just culturally not as many women feel safe, so then it just doesn't recapitulate more women? Or do you think that there's an active suppression of women's voices, or just culturally people are like, oh yeah, magic isn't for women? We haven't gotten to the place with science where there's this movement of science is for everybody. You don't have to be a man to be a scientist. Is that happening in magic?
Yes and no. I think that the way I often describe it is I have what I call the brick theory, which is basically it stemmed from watching these young girls who were wearing dresses be taught a magic trick at magic camp, and they were required to have pockets, and their dresses didn't have pockets. And so I watched them quit learning this magic trick and just waited for the next one to be taught. And so in that moment, I went, oh, okay, so a layer of brick just got laid for these 11-year-old girls. And at the moment, they can still step over the wall.
Yeah.
But then each time something like that happens, it doesn't mean that a layer can't get knocked down as well. But layer upon layer upon layer gets laid. And eventually it gets too high to jump over for yourself. So maybe friends are helping you. And then eventually it just gets too high for it to be worth any effort. For some women, that is, I don't feel like jumping.
Totally.
I'm not passionate about what's on the other side to jump.
Yeah. It's not worth the bodily risk and the...
Exactly. Yeah. When you weigh the pros and cons, you're just like, no, all right, and I think I'm done. And so I think that's a thing. And I don't think there's one real answer. There is definitely this weird underlying suppression of women. I think it's better now, but most people still don't acknowledge the first two magicians on television were both women, because their shows were shorter lived, 2 years and a year, but they don't get acknowledged a lot in magic history. But also, you could say the same for the first American-born magician was not Harry Houdini. It was a Black man named Richard Potter.
Yeah,
so and no one knows who he is, right? So there's definitely always sort of going to be that unless you're really seeking out the information. But it's hard to seek out the information when it's not right in front of your face. You don't know that there's information to get, right?
And of course, as people like myself, for example, who are not magicians.
Yeah.
It's going to be oh, I'm going to passively receive
for sure
any info. People who are listening right now are like, oh, this is the first time I've ever thought of magic.
Yeah.
So how would they know?
As they should. Yeah. You should have not thought about magic until right in this moment. I completely agree with you. So yeah, I think it's just sort of everything. Unfortunately, there's no real answer. There's no real there isn't, at least from my understanding, there isn't a group of guys that get together and go, how do we make magic white and male?
Yeah, of course.
I don't think that that's really a thing. I think people just don't, and I have this conversation a lot with very different members of the older magic generation. And that's not summarizing the older magic generation, but just from that perspective is I talk to them a lot and where they don't quite understand what's necessary. So sometimes quotas are implemented where they're not supposed to be. Sometimes let's do an all women's thing, but we're not going to book them for any other shows throughout the rest of the year. But this 1 week you get your light. You're like, oh, Lord, no. So you kind of have to describe a lot of things. And it's just sort of coming from a time and a place where this hasn't had to be thought about before. So it's just like, oh, no, we understand.
Yeah, it's privilege. It's the definition of privilege.
Absolutely.
It's just you can be lazy, you can be complacent, you can be like, oh, well, if I were to make effect change, I would do it this way. And it's no, but that's the problem is that you have had the fucking power this whole time and you suck at affecting change.
Exactly.
It's even the people who actively want to be better, it's you're not good at it. That's why it's still like this. And then there are a handful of people who are but I like it this way.
Yeah.
But women should be seen and not heard. You know, that still exists.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Sadly. But those people are old, right? Mostly.
Yeah, I think there is there's a different understand, like, a different way of doing the same thing for the younger generation. And I think that is let me use this magic trick to get this woman's number, make her kiss me on stage.
Yeah,
Or like,
gross.
I'm watching people under the age of 35 do that. And you're like, what? No, stop. Or the assistant thing.
Yeah.
So it's not so much spoken as it
Mhm.
used to be. It's much more action where,
Gotcha.
or just like refusing to have an understanding of what magic would be like if you had to learn magic, and the way it's being taught in the book, you cannot do because you just don't want to wear a jacket
Yeah.
or pants, and that's not just for women. I think that's for magic is written by and for one type of man.
Yeah.
And so I think it becomes difficult when you aren't that. And that's for anybody. So there's just a different level, I think, of the fight that exists. It's not so much a like, sweetheart, you can't do magic, although I still do get told that regularly.
Mm.
But it's more just sort of this innate bias that exists.
Yeah, it's like, but you don't fit the mold, so
Right.
you're on your own, sugar.
Yep.
Like, you got to figure that shit out because
Yep.
you obviously, like, because your boobs are in the way of the trick. So,
Yes, yeah.
you want to figure out how to make your boobs not be in the way. You got this. But
Yep. That has been a topic of discussion before
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, Lord, what?
yeah.
Actually, they're helpful. Do you know how much I can hide in here?
Yeah.
So much.
That's awesome.
Full animals can hide in this.
I said, don't tell me, but I'm always
Oh, sorry,
amazed when I see like those amazing, like, the bird guy or the pulling the mice out of my pockets or
Yep,
whatever.
mice.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, look at that. That's so cool.
Celeste, who I was telling you about, Celeste Evans, used to do a bird act in a skin-tight dress with a slit up the side.
I can't.
And
with
you're
the
just like,
birds.
I don't, how?
Yeah, I
it's
still, even
amazing.
even if somebody was wearing like the baggiest suit with like a million pockets, I'd still be like, there's no way that many birds were in those pockets. Don't tell me it's the same bird over and over. I don't want to know.
I won't tell you anything.
Damn it. I never want to know. I'm never that person. It makes me sad when I meet that person who's like, it's one thing to have that reaction. Like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
That's like what you want, right? That's the
Right.
most, holy shit, how did they do that? But then when somebody's like, no, but really I want to know. I'm like, no, you don't. That takes all the fun out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, sometimes because I work a lot of corporate events, and a lot of corporate events that hire magicians are tech companies or
Yeah.
STEM companies,
Yeah.
and so you're getting a lot of people who are in need of understanding how the world
Yeah,
works.
like if they're uncomfortable, like existentially, unless they can like
Exactly.
know the trick.
Exactly right. And magic and science have both their best friends on one front and antithesis on the other.
Yeah.
So, magic is obviously defying science, but when you look at how it's done, it's all science.
Yeah.
And so when you have people who are science-based and they watch a magic trick and they cannot understand it, they get really mad. And I've met people, and I think you have too, where people are like, I hate magic. I hate it so much.
Yeah.
And then when you probe and you say, why do you hate magic? Most of the time, it could be various answers, but a lot of the time I meet people who say, I just don't like not knowing how it's done.
Mm.
So I have a rule when I do events where I meet somebody like that, which is I say, you have to watch it from the front 3 times, and then I'll let you watch it from over my shoulder.
Really?
I will never, I never want anybody to walk away hating magic.
Uh-huh.
And what ends up happening is those people end up loving it more.
Cool.
I've like taught magic to those people.
Yeah.
I've gotten hired for stuff where then they like watch me do things and they'll go, well, how about this, and that, it becomes more of an interest.
So you're okay kind of to some extent, maybe not to a full extent, but to some extent peeking, like pulling back the veil for them.
I mean, I think YouTube already has. So what damage
I guess
can
I just
do?
pretend not to see any of that. I don't know
I mean,
why.
you should, yeah.
I feel like there's still this like holy kind of like, I don't want to know,
Yeah.
but that's me. And you're right. There are a lot of people who don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's more impressive when I don't know. And if once I do figure it out, I'm like, oh, I mean, there's still like the skill involved.
Yeah.
That's like it's insane. Like I still could never do it,
Sure.
but even just knowing the trick like makes it less magical to me, and
Yeah.
that makes me sad.
Well, I think that makes sense. And if you're somebody who's absolutely fine in knowing that there is a method, but you don't
Yeah.
care to know it, then that's how you want. I mean, we all know that CGI is involved in making Captain Marvel fly. We're fine with it. I normally say Superman, but I'm going to change to Captain Marvel.
I like that, yeah.
Thank you. It just makes me happy.
Yeah.
But in that regard, so like that there's CGI, our version of CGI, in a magic trick, but it's still Captain Marvel's flying. So if you're fine with that, it's great. But there's also people that go, wow, that CGI is amazing. I would love to learn how somebody does that.
Yeah.
Then that's where you have to go. You can't say no because then they're going to hate it.
That's cool because I feel like a lot of people do just say no.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, oh no, this is like, I'm privy to this and you're not.
Yes.
And it ruins it for everybody if you somehow have some information. Like, again, that privileged information where like, it's my choice that I don't want to know because it's more fun for me.
Absolutely.
It's like, if I go see a puppet show, what the fuck? When's the last time I saw a puppet show? But I don't want, like, where did that come from? But yeah, if I went to
your go-to example. Just all the puppet shows
I go to. Yeah, if I go to a puppet show, I want to watch the puppets because I want to find myself in the story. I don't want to stare at the puppet masters' faces and like keeping pulled out of it, you know?
Yes.
But some people do, I guess. And that's fine too. And you're right, the STEM people do. And I find that for me, some of the more successful magic is like, a lot of the magicians that I know because they perform at like skeptic and science conferences.
Yes.
And they have like an understanding and an appreciation and a respect for the way that scientists think. So they sort of do shows for scientists. So the magic is still there, but they're like, I know you know that I'm not fucking reading your mind. Like,
yes.
Because I know you don't believe in that shit.
Right.
And neither do I. Yeah. So let's just be clear that I am fucking playing a trick on you.
Yes.
And I like that. I like that there's that one given. Because the one thing I don't like is when people are like, I have special powers.
Oh, I can't stand it.
That's like, that's really not okay.
No.
Right?
No.
Like, I think it's actually like dangerous. Like they're charlatans.
Oh, I mean, it's exactly what your run-of-the-mill on the corner $20 to talk to your dead loved one psychic is doing, right?
It's the same thing.
It's exactly the same thing. It's giving hope to people who need it, but it's not right. And that, I'm with you. It bothers me so much when it's especially like mainly mentalists.
Yeah, it's mostly mental. You're right, because sleight of hand magicians are not like. I mean, some of them might be, but mostly they're not like, I'm reading your mind, because that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean...
They're like, no, I stole your watch.
They're
like, cool.
Magic. Yeah, most close-up or most sleight of hand-based magicians that I know would never go, I sold my soul and now I have this power. I was born with some ability to make your card come to the top. Like, that's a pretty shitty ability, isn't it?
Right? So like, why not like win the lottery?
Yeah, or like grow food.
See, you're so good.
I'd love to just grow food with the snap of a finger. Wouldn't that be a great power?
Yeah.
Nope, I got some shitty, make your ace of hearts. What? Vanished and went to this box. Boom.
Cool.
Born. Amazing. That was terrible. Yeah, so I find most mentalists, just because mentalism is so inherently powerful, you thought of a thing, and I told you what that thing was.
Yeah.
And most people will not remember the procedure that got you from thinking of the thing to hearing that thing. They miss the method, or they miss where they could actually backtrack and go, oh, yeah, that's how it was done. It's just too amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, I find a lot of mentalists are absolutely fine letting the audience believe they have some superpower.
And I feel like there's a way to have it both ways. There's a way to, in the moment, make them feel like I read your mind, but also to be pretty clear about the fact that, like, I didn't actually read your mind. Like, all of this is in service to you feeling like I'm reading your mind.
Yeah, I have friends they're a mentalist couple, and the way that they do it is they make a very funny parody joke where they say she was born in Hungary, which is truth. And then saying, so my wife's Hungarian, and so she's a Hungarian Balaton mystic. And everyone's like, this is not accurate. And then they make it funny. Yeah. And then, of course, they blow your mind. But again, that's about you're watching a piece of entertainment. Yeah. And then you leave it at that.
Exactly.
Which is the smart way to do it. There's always validation to being able to divulge something somebody's thinking about.
Yeah.
But the way not to do it is to make somebody believe that you're doing something you're not.
Yeah, because then you're only one step away from taking their money in a vulnerable moment,
Exactly.
right? It's like there's no difference between a very talented mentalist doing a stage show and like Chris Edwards or whatever was that his name? Whatever Edwards.
I know
Do you
who
remember
you're
who I'm talking about? John Edwards. Yes, the first John Edwards, who was like, I'm reading your dead fucking, sister or whatever is like telling me through, because then it's like, yeah, they're just going to take your money. And it's one thing to take the $20 for the show or the $70 for the show because everybody's paying the same amount because they're getting entertained. It's another thing, for, like you said, your corner store psychic to say, oh, and then maybe you should come back and maybe you should come back and maybe you should come back. And
I mean, just a better use of spending your money is therapy, right? It's just like pay your copay and go to a therapist. It's going to do so much better for you.
And thank you for that, because that's what I'm training to be now.
Yeah.
So I'll take it. Yeah.
Great. You're welcome. Congratulations. This is great news.
No, that's really funny. But there is a fine line, right, between snake oil salesmen. And that's the really sad thing is it's two sides of the same coin. You can like do this really cool thing for good, or you can kind of do it for evil. Yeah. And it bums me out when you meet people who are trying to sort of have it both ways, where they're like, no, I'm a professional magician who can read your mind. And you're like, no, you're not. No, you can't. But I want you to make me feel like you can in the moment. I just don't want you to be an asshole about it.
Correct. Well, that's also the turning it off situation. And a lot of magicians cannot turn it off, where they are a magician from the moment they wake up to the moment they fall asleep. And even during their sleep, they are still thinking about magic. And I just can't be that person. Like I imagine doctors want to not diagnose people on their days off. I'm that person. I want a day off. I don't want to think about or do a show or whatever. So if I meet somebody and I say, oh, I'm a magician, I've always, do something. No. I will not. Yeah. I will not for both you and for my own sanity. But I just can't be those people who constantly are saying, magician, magic. And that when you start going, and I can read your mind right now, we start towing that line. We start getting into a dangerous area of going, so this is an entertainment performance.
Yeah.
Not think of something right now and I'm going to change your life.
Yeah.
That is disgusting.
And also and there's even kind of like I used to think when I would meet a mentalist and they would be like, oh, it's all psychology. Oh, it's all whatever. And I'd be like, oh, cool. Okay. So like they're just using inherent like human thing. But even later, I started to realize like, yeah, that's part of it. But it's also just bullshit tricks. Yeah. Like a lot of it is literally just tricks. And then when I realized that, I was almost mad at the people who were trying to like say, oh, I'm not, I'm just using your inherent cues that you're giving me to be able to. And it's like, wait, but you're not even really doing that. Like sometimes you're literally just like, well, I don't want to say what some of the tricks are, but literally it's just a fucking trick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, God. Well, that kind of helps me feel less crazy in the world, I think, which is kind of nice, you know?
There are things that there are elements of mentalism that do require body language or cold reading.
Cold reading, exactly.
Absolutely.
But then also, sometimes people are hot reading, and that's the other thing that you have to remember. It's like, oh, they did homework.
Yeah. They did homework. They, had you do something, like gave them information, whatever that is. Absolutely. 100%. I can't say that. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Magic is magic.
Yeah. And I like that. To me makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground, but what we haven't really talked about is like how you specifically utilize a lot of this ground that we cover. So we were talking around your stage show before, which is funny because people should go to your stage show. So we should talk about like what it is and what it's called and who you're doing it with. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm in a show called Champions of Magic. It is sort of I have my own stuff as well. I have my own show and various shows and things, but Champions of Magic is sort of my main thing because it's awesome. And
cool.
In a sense, it's great to tour the world and perform in theaters. And I haven't really had to do contract negotiations in a long time. So it's really nice, selfishly for me, but also not selfishly, like for the audience. It's a really fun show. It started in the UK, so it's about 5 years old now. I've been in the show for a little over 2 years. When they first did their first US run is where I got picked up.
Cool.
And so there are 5 different magicians, 4 acts. One of them's a double act. And every type of magic. So we do have a mentalist. I do the close-up magic. So I'm projected on a screen. I'm in the audience doing stuff.
Oh, cool.
Calling up people and having like a one-on-one intimate experience that's projected for the whole audience. So that's really fun.
Is that like what you would, if it were like when you do your own show, is that what you tend to focus on? Or is it just because that is sort of the slot that made the most sense with this ensemble type show?
So that slot was what was available.
Gotcha.
So not necessarily the woman who had been doing the show before me sort of did a spectrum of things, as I do as well. It's not just close-up sleight of hand. It's got a couple other things in there. We also try to say that in the show, we have an escape artist too. We also try to say in the show that we all have superpowers that aren't styles of magic.
Gotcha.
But, like, my superpower is I'm very good at small interactions. So one-on-one, I'm very trustworthy. Like I'm really great with kids in the show because they just inherently are like, she seems fun. I'm very much like everybody's best friend. So I use that as well in my own stuff. So if you were to ask somebody in the magic community if they happen to have heard me. Yeah. I'm not famous or anything, but most of my expertise is bar magic. So doing magic behind a bar for like 50 to 100 people or 2 people. It's
so it has the close-up component to it, but it has to be slightly bigger in some ways too.
Exactly. So it's that's what we define as parlor magic. Yeah. So that term came from doing magic in somebody's living room for their party, their family party. So that's usually what I try to go for is that parlory style, or taking close-up and making it parlor, which is just bar magic.
Gotcha.
So that's mainly what my expertise, if I were to have one, would be it.
So you're not making birds come out of thin air?
Not since I was a teenager.
You did bird stuff when you were a teenager. That's cool.
What a time. I mean, there are so many reasons not to use birds in magic.
Yeah, I know, but it's still so cool.
It's when you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. That it's cool. Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't want to know.
Nope. In literally 30 seconds, I will ruin bird magic for you. I won't. I won't. All you should know is that if anybody out there is interested in trying to do magic with animals, just don't. Yeah. It's not fun for them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So I think there are ways to do it that are right, but at the same time, it's still going very much against animal
welfare.
Yeah, and just general behavior.
Yeah, like Killer, for example, would be a great assistant.
It would be fantastic.
But he would not be probably a good prop.
Yeah, no, he doesn't want to hide in a box.
No, he just wants to be on stage with his mama.
Absolutely.
Or sleep in his bed next to us while we podcast.
If the box he had to hide in was this current bed that he's in, he probably would be fine. But yeah, no, I get it.
I get that. Yeah, that makes sense. So, because they're unwilling participants, which is a bit shit. And you're right, there's probably kind of a long, seedy history of like monkeys and like
just everything, elephants
and gross.
Tigers.
Yeah, the circusy component to it. Yeah,
the tigers are the sad one.
It's really sad. It's all
they
sad.
They shouldn't be there.
No.
Let them go back home.
Yeah.
Wherever that might be.
That's all too sad. We're going to change the subject. Okay.
Hey, moving on.
So that is your stage show that is traveling, or the live show that you've been working on with these other individuals. What about your own personal show? Like, can anybody hire you for a corporate event or for a gig?
Yeah. Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
My name's Kayla. You may hire me. So I work, as we mentioned, I work a lot in corporate, even still with the touring show. So that is anywhere between a 30-minute to an hour-long show for, awards, banquets, and things are big. Christmas parties, holiday parties are really big for hiring a magician.
Yeah.
So that's really fun. And then also just sort of my favorite thing to do when not doing the tour is, and it's a huge market in Los Angeles, is people will hire you to come for their 50th birthday party or their anniversary or whatever. I don't really do kids magic, but doing, where there's a mix of age ranges for this family party.
Sure. So if kids are there.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
I just don't do all the kids sit in the front, all the adults do whatever they want.
Like 7-year-old birthday party. Because you're not also like a babysitter. Like you're not doing that kind of component of it.
Yeah. And I know the kids magicians out there are just heroes of the industry where when you can do it well, and I know a lot of the guys who do kids magic incredibly well, and it's an art in its
self. It's a different skill, right? Because you're also like you're writing for a specific audience.
Yes, and you have to keep them entertained for insert amount of time here. So in a sense, you are their babysitter, but also the way you're doing it has to be pretty top notch. So yeah, it's just not for me. That's just not where my abilities lie. But I love doing the private parties in people's homes, or those are great. But yeah, so that's basically it. And then my full show is very highly audience participatory. So it does require a lot of people to, throughout the time, come on stage. So what's great about corporate events is the CEO is probably going to come up and do something really fun.
Right, because
so
they have
everybody
to
can
do
cheer
that
them on. Exactly.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. I really like it. It does interweave sciencey stuff as well, which I really enjoy talking about.
I love that.
Yeah. So
and then also the one thing that we didn't even mention yet, which is crazy because we're sitting here across from each other on these microphones, is that you also podcast.
I do podcast.
Yeah, you do Shezam.
Yeah, that's it. We couldn't think of a better name.
No, I think Shezam is so like, it's so obviously perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's great.
Like, it's like STEMinist or something,
Yes,
you know, it's that like you guys are magicians and you're women in an industry that's like so male dominated. And so are those components that you talk about like pretty regularly?
Yeah. I mean, everything that we've talked about today is a pretty similar discussion. Just obviously we have episode after episode to sort of flesh out what everything looks like. It's the first resource that's ever existed that discusses various topics of inequality within the magic community. And our discussions span just a massive span of, we have one episode I'm really proud of. It's all just about sexual assault. So we talk about that. And 2, just talking about how to, like 5 things we watch magicians do wrong with their audience volunteers. We'll talk about, right? We interview a lot of people who are amazing. And yeah, it's great because it's been about a year now. We do it fairly casually because both my co-host Carisa and I are professional touring magicians. So we do our best to get them out pretty regularly. And so we'll do like a big batch record and then release and then over time.
Seasons. Yeah,
exactly.
Instead of like this show where it's just like every Monday for my entire life.
Forever.
What am I doing?
Forever. It's been 5 years?
Yeah, 6 now, I think.
Congratulations.
You're going to be, let me see if I can look up. You're going to be episode, this is very, it might not even be the case because I change it all the time.
That's
but
fine.
As of right now, you are actually going to be this coming Monday. So you're episode 295. What? So that's almost 6 full years. Like we're moving into year 7 soon.
You need a break. Or maybe a cookie.
I prefer a cookie.
Well, maybe a cookie.
Then I can just keep going.
I love it. I love it so much. What a hero.
That's really cool. So you and Carisa, what's her last name?
Hendricks.
Carisa
like
Hendricks. Cool. And you guys, she's also a professional musician.
Fine. I'm surprised it took this long. That was really great.
How common is it that people say musician instead of magician?
I was waiting for it in the first 10 seconds. So well done. That's nothing on you. That is a very just normal thing that happens. So well done. Very happy.
Shit. I love it though when people have the play on like I've had Art Benjamin on the show, and so he's like the mathemagician, right? And so we talked about math and magic, and then like my friend Viam, who is which I never said. Oh, he's a doctor who is also a magician, and then my friend Tegan, I was telling her about him, and she was like, oh, he's a physician magician. I was like, yeah, of course. I was like, how does he not go by the physician magician?
Oh, he should now. That's brilliant.
Like, hello.
We'll let him know.
But yeah, musician. Are there any musician magicians? Probably.
Tons. All of them.
You're like, it's old hat.
Yeah. There's a lot of crossover between like music and magic and then science and magic. Yeah. Math and magic is huge.
And math and magic and comedy and magic, which is like, to me personally, I don't want to watch really and this is just my taste.
Sure.
I don't want to watch a really earnest, like, wah-wah kind of magic show. Like, I want the magician to be a personable and very funny and very, like, authentic magician. That is what speaks to me. And those are the shows where I'll talk about it for days and I'll tell people how great it was. And I'm probably also a weird audience member in the sense that, like, I actually go to magic shows.
That is weird, yeah.
Right? Like I have magician friends and like I go to magic show. You're right. Most people probably as adults only ever saw magic because there was a corporate event or there was a party or...
Yep. We have a lot of like season ticket holders that come to our show that have never seen magic before. And they tell us, they're like, this is my first magic show.
Oh, cool.
Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's really neat. Yeah.
You're not alone in saying that you want your magician to be more personable. But I think that's everything. I think because it's so easy to not have personal interactions right now, that it's nice to have them.
Yeah.
And if you buy a ticket to something or get the opportunity to be entertained by somebody, you want to feel like you learned something about them and vice versa. And so, I think that's important, is to have like an actual personality when on stage. The time of and this is no slight to those magicians who have paved the way for today, but
Yeah.
the time of the let's just stare down the lens of a camera and watch how great I am type of magic I think is pretty much over. People just don't want it. At least people under the age of 35.
I think you're right. It's probably true. Because you look at like the actual cultural phenomena of magic. So not just like a stage show that you can go to, or like going to the Magic Castle, which you're right is like a kind of spoiled thing here in LA. Like most people don't have magic castles in their towns.
Yeah, right.
Actually, nobody does except for people in LA. But this idea of like what is doing well, like on Netflix, or what is doing well, and these are like street magic shows, and like on like all the Got Talents that are all over the world. The people who are winning these kinds of things are the people who are like real people you would want to hang out with.
Yes, that's exactly right. As well as there actually are more magic venues popping up around the country, which is really cool. So people are starting to get more like ability to see magic. And whenever me personally, I'm in those spaces, the magicians that do the best are the ones that have that ability to personally interact with an audience. You want to see a show that you don't think you're ever going to see again. So so that's why what I do is very highly participatory, because I want the audience to give me something that I can roll with.
Yeah.
And that makes that show completely different than anyone you're going to see again. Amazing Jonathan, this amazing magician, he is the one that I had heard originally say, make every show feel like it's the first time that happened.
Yeah.
And that's what you want.
That's smart too, because it almost has like an improv vibe to it, even though it's really rehearsed and practiced. So that it's like every show is a new show because that audience member is a different person. Yes. And they're, even if it's as small as their one reaction or this one thing that they did, even if the trick is the same, like it feels like a new show every time.
Yeah. And because I'm improv and comedy based, is that I audio record every show on my Apple Watch, because I never know what's going to come out of my mouth. I'm just reacting to a thing. Like I don't have lines I use every show because not every person is the same.
Yeah.
So I do try to genuinely react to people.
That must be scary for magicians to do. I wonder how common that is.
Not really.
Because like the whole point is that it's like perfectly coordinated and timed and choreographed, and so probably to have it heavily scripted is like a little bit safer feeling.
Absolutely. And I have a script, but I don't use it most times. There's no point. I never know what's happening, and it's great. It makes every show very different, and then it also makes it more fun for me. It keeps it fresh.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's like the Eagles playing Hotel California for the 9 millionth time. Like, how do people do that when it's?
I cannot imagine what it's like to sing My Heart Will Go On. I really love Celine Dion, and
poor woman.
If she listens to this show, just give me a ring.
Yeah, right, because we're not saying we don't love the song, but I only hear it once in a blue moon.
Absolutely.
You have to sing it like multiple times
all the
day.
Time.
Yeah. That must be really hard. You're right.
I can't imagine.
Oof.
What a hero.
Seriously, yes. And that's the thing about performance that I think a lot of times people don't realize, because we are lucky enough. And they say the same thing, I remember learning the same thing about therapy when I first started in my PhD program, is my professors would say, you have to remember that you're your client's only therapist. They're not your only client. You might have 20 or 30 clients in a week, depending on your caseload or depending on, whatever, but you're their only therapist. And it's the same thing with this kind of art. Like, they're not going to watch your show every night. They see your show once, or they see it once every 6 months, or they see it. And so for them, that's everything.
Yeah. And also it could be, this is a little bit of a heavier burden to bear, but you could be the only magician they ever see.
Yeah.
That's very likely. Or it might be the only magician they ever see live. As you said, it's very in the zeitgeist right now of Netflix, et cetera, where magic is just everywhere. But the live is probably not. I mean, theater is expensive.
It is, yeah.
And so if people are there to watch you, like, you're going to put in a lot of effort, hopefully, to make that moment very special.
It's a responsibility. And the cool thing is, like, you care, and magicians like you really do care about somebody leaving being like, as an art, this is something that I appreciate. So, like, you're going to do what you can do to ensure that they don't leave ever. Not only do they leave with like an excitement about it, but they never leave with a bad taste in their mouth. And sometimes that's nothing you did. It's just
Sure.
their own relationship with this cognitive dissonance of magic.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm just going to do my best to make magic not feel. I mean, I inherently, just by being a woman doing magic, am immediately different than.
Disarming almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And audiences don't necessarily think, oh my God, wow, I've never seen a woman. Because they just don't have enough experience with magic. If I'm the first magician they've ever seen, well, that's not a thought they should have. And they mostly don't. A lot of women think that. But for the across the board, like I rarely get people that say something along those lines. But I'm just inherently different already. That why not keep that going as much as possible? So you see I'm different, but also you then experience how much I can make magic different, and that's also a really big like thing that I carry, which is just going. I never want to do anything generic ever.
Yeah.
It would not be satisfying for me, but also it's important for the audience to not have to experience. I don't want them to come to our show and then go to another show and see the same stuff. I want it to be incredibly different.
And that can happen with magic sometimes. You can be like, oh, I've seen the same show 10 times by 10 different people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are the staples that every magician performs at some point. So it's important to make it, even if you're doing the same trick, to at least make it feel and be different.
Look, it's a bird.
Yeah,
it's another bird.
Oh, the birds.
All right. So before we get going, I always ask my guests the same 2 questions, and I'm definitely interested to see what your responses are to those questions. So
Are they?
They're big picture questions. And yeah, I want to hear what you got to say. So I want you to think about the future. And this could be like, the context can be, your work, your career. It can be like personal. It can be like global issues, any context you want. You can pick that lane. So when you think about the future, number 1, what is the thing that like keeps you up the most at night, that you're sort of like, ugh, shit's not looking good, pessimistic about, maybe a little cynical about? On the flip side of that, what do you have like a genuine optimism and hopefulness for, not lip service, but like, what are you actually really excited about and looking forward to?
It's really fun listening to a podcast and then being like, oh, those are the things you ask everybody.
Yeah, should have thought about that.
No, I like it because now I'm like, oh, I could have thought about it more.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm really enjoying
this. Happens to me when I go on other people's shows and they're like, I'm going to turn it around on you and ask you the same 2 questions. So I'm like, shit.
Yes. Oh, what is my answer? I don't so many possibilities. Yeah. Killer, what do you think?
Big yawn from Killer right there.
That's how I feel as well.
This is boring to me because I am a dog.
Because he's a dog. Oh, he's
my
so
God,
cute.
He's so fucking cute.
Oh, okay, distraction. So pessimist about. I mean, I'm really. I did study science, so science.
You did?
Yeah, it's not important.
That's cool.
It was so long ago. It was different version of myself. But yeah, I mean,
in there. It never leaves.
It doesn't, though. It just sits in the back of your brain, and you can't stop thinking about it. I was a green energy major, so it was like really exciting.
Cool. Couldn't have been that long ago because I feel like that wasn't a degree like that long ago.
It was like right on the cusp of hydrogen fuel cell transportation coming into play, but then got knocked down because funding went to electric cars, and I was going the fuel cell route because I was like, I'm going to make everything this, and then nothing happened. So
you still get a bigger kickback from the government if you have hydrogen fuel cell car. There just like aren't any.
I know. Well,
I drive electric only because like that's what you do. Like, how the hell do you drive hydrogen fuel cell?
I mean, you can't. There's a hydrogen refueling station in the town I grew up in Connecticut. But then the next closest one is Vermont. So you can just about make it there if you take no detours. So it's a little anyway. So I usually get kept up at night just by thinking about like the ignorance surrounding climate change denial. That's a big one for me. And it is like such a prevalent part of my day, just thinking about like, oh, how could you just maybe don't use this much plastic, or maybe like think about what you're putting out into the environment. And when you see people just not care or completely ignore that it's real or deny it, right? I think it feels like, at least from the people that I'm around more people that just don't care. They know it's real, but don't care to actually do anything about it because it's hard to adjust habits.
And we've developed a structure around ourselves that like we've painted a really beautiful like like mirage that's kind of like, you don't have to care because look, you
Exactly.
can just throw it away.
Right.
And it goes away.
And you never see it again.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we are certainly no heroes. So like, we're not doing anything radical. I have some old friends that like, they're one of those people that put all their trash in a jar and
Yeah,
for the whole year.
That.
And you're
it's
like
single use, or she hasn't bought single use plastic in like years.
What? That's
and I'm
amazing.
like, how do you do that? Yeah.
I just order
That's
so
like
much food delivery that there's no hope.
Oh my God, Postmates you're right. It's the worst.
So great.
And every time I get it to, I'm like, I'm going to reuse this. And
you might do it one time.
Yeah.
But really it just goes away, doesn't it?
No, it does. It's bad.
I try to like just shop at places, get food from places that I know like this is a sustainable, decomposting. Blah, blah,
like
blah.
do what we can when we can.
Exactly.
And then when we can't, then we're like, shit.
Yeah, I just try.
Yeah, exactly.
Just try my best.
Just be mindful.
Yep. So I get kept up at night a lot by people who just don't care.
That's fair.
And I traveled the country, right? So I'm really seeing like in places where it just doesn't matter.
Oh, where they're like so willfully ignorant about the problem that they refuse to admit the problem exists.
Yeah.
Bad.
Absolutely. We're vegan as well. So like that's for multiple reasons, but one of them is environmental.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to places that have absolutely no idea what that is, you're just like, how do you feel about climate change? And many an Uber driver go on some big rant about it not being real. And you're just like, oh, people know. So that is something that I feel slightly pessimistic about, just the amount of people that are either ignorant to it or don't want to know about it or deny it. And then also people who are that in power.
Yeah, because that's where the real problem is, right? It's not so much the shruggies, even though they contribute, but it's like, it's the people who have actually like developed a misinformation campaign for political or economic gain.
Yeah.
Who, whether they buy what they're selling or not, it's almost irrelevant because they've created this. And it's sad because I'm actually starting to see in the literature, in the psychology literature, specifically the clinical literature, more and more publications about eco-anxiety.
Oh, interesting.
Like this is an actual like term that people are starting to use, and clinicians, especially with much younger people, are starting to see real like clinical anxiety symptoms in young people where they're unable to focus, they're unable to function in certain respects because they're so nervous and upset. And it's like this problem that feels so big and unmanageable, but they're like, what's going to happen to me?
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to live in this world where this shit, like the walls are closing in and nobody's listening? I'm screaming into a void.
Yeah.
It's like sad.
Yeah.
It's, it's a hard thing.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about just that void screaming. That's how I felt about the climate change and all of that. But that's also how I felt about being this minority in a community for so long, which is the lovely transition into the optimist side of this conversation. Which is, I think when we started our podcast, we didn't know, I still don't, as you know, like how often do you actually see the people
Never.
that listen?
Never.
Right.
Like once in a blue moon, and I'm like, oh my God, somebody knows my show.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
You also, because you have a Patreon as well, right? So you also can see.
It's like a name on a page for sure. But they're still like disembodied people. Every so often people write me like really sweet notes though. Thank you guys so much for those because they like literally make my day. Because you forget sometimes that anybody cares.
Yeah. It does feel like I'm just talking into a microphone with my friend and then calling it a day.
Yeah.
And that is what you're doing. You forget that people listen to it. And what we've seen over the last year of time with this podcast is that we are just pushing the boulder forward that had already been pushed by many, many, many women before us. We just happen to be loud and have this ability to be loud on a platform.
Yeah.
And what we've actually seen over the last year of existing is that a lot of people have what we think just been better minded in the community, better about their language, better about understanding when things are wrong, in a sense, better woke.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We get a lot of letters and things, or a lot of people saying like, thank you for pointing this out. I was doing this thing and I'm very happy to have been told not to because no one told me before this moment. We also get a lot of people who tell us that we're bitches and should shut up, but it's fine. That happens as it will, no matter what you're doing and who you are. But for this is like, oh, wow, I think this could actually be really beneficial. And I can't tell you that the numbers are growing. I can tell you the more pessimist side of it and how I can show that they're not, and that there's I just hit the microphone. That there's a cyclical sort of growth and then decline that happens.
It happens. I mean, it happens to my show too. Yeah.
But what I can say is I think the language is changing and the mentality in the industry is changing, and I'm very excited to see where magic is in another 10 years.
Amazing. So who's listening to your show specifically? Have you ever been able to do any whether it be like classic market research or just like talking to people? Is it mostly magicians? Is it mostly guy magicians who are like a little bit more feminist and want to be better? Is it early career women magicians, or is it my listenership? I think there's going to be a lot of crossover. Like some of my listenership might already be listening, but I bet you now there's going to be more people who come and listen because of this conversation. But my listenership's 80% male it is, because it's like this
science.
It's science. Yeah. And that's just like this hurdle that I can't seem to, it's like everything about the show is so feminist. And then it's like, which is like great because I want these guys to hear it, but also like, where are the women?
That's pretty much in line though with the representation of women in STEM though, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually, I think, better in the social sciences and in biological sciences, neuroscience, starting to get better in chemistry. It's closer to what you see, I think, in physics. And also it's closer to what you see at the highest levels, because actually we've got pretty decent gender parity at like the undergrad level. It's getting to the point where you're almost seeing more women getting bachelor's degrees in lots of sciences. Yeah, it's great. But the leaky pipeline's still gross, and there's like very few tenured professors.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think we don't have a way of tracking. If I were to just say how many people talk to me and say they listen, I would say it's pretty much in line with the 2% representation.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if it was about 2 to 5% of our listenership was women. I do know that there are women who think that they shouldn't listen to us. And that's a whole other like
women who are involved in magic?
Yeah, they don't like us.
Like you're like the people who are like raising hell and rabble rousing and making a stink? Or
yeah, there's a combination. There's that. There's still a mentality of there can only be one, or there can only be one group of us, or whatever it is. So that is an issue as well.
How we basically firebomb ourselves by being like, oh, I can't help you. The man is keeping us down, so we've got to also keep each other down.
Yes.
It's gross.
Yes. We also have an episode called Why Women Are Terrible at Magic, which might have ruffled a few feathers, but also
this is coming from two women who do magic. So obviously there's something tongue-in-cheek about that, right?
Absolutely. But also the point is that women are given opportunity before they're ready to have a name within the community, and then they stay for a couple of years and then no longer exist because they just can't sustain the new car smell type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a point. It's actually we like statistically show how that is a thing. But regardless, is that I think most of our listenership, most of the people we talk to are men. And oddly enough, they're slightly older men too. They're like 35 to 50 years old. So it's great because we get a lot of guys who say, I just never thought about that thing before. And what really we initially intended this to be for women. We didn't want it to be, it's not a money-making thing. We're not trying to do, it's just we're trying to help this issue that we had to deal with and want other people to not have to do that. And what we have seen is that the community has genuinely changed a lot of their mindsets on stuff from,
that's amazing.
One person listening to the podcast then tells their magic club, hey, we shouldn't do this anymore. We should do this. And then that changes. And so that's what we're seeing, which is why I'm really excited about it, is that I think the podcast has, that wasn't our intention, but I think we created allies.
Yeah.
And allies who know what they're talking about and also know that they don't know what they're talking about. As we say all the time, I don't know what I'm talking about. So just sharing experience and research. But now we have guys who are standing with us going, yes, no, I know what to do now.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful.
Well, and it's as frustrating as it is, it's fundamentally important, right? Because we know that the movers and shakers, the people who actually get things done because of the privilege and the, systemic shit that's built in, are the men.
Mhm.
And so until the men are allies,
Yeah.
you can scream into the void like we were talking about as much as you want. But then when you start having other people being like, oh, I hear you,
Mhm.
and I'm going to do what I can because I actually have more pull, sadly, eventually you all work together to get to a place of change, which is important. It's frustrating, but it's important.
Yep. It's like that cartoon where it's like, what's a good leader? And then there's one guy standing on top of the mountain while all the other people are just going, help, help, help. And then there's one person helping you up the mountain.
Yeah.
And I think what we've done is created more people helping people up the mountain. And so we didn't mean to because we didn't know what was going to happen. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
so
it's
we're very happy
very
about
cool.
it. So I'm excited about that and what hopefully this will become a long time down the future.
Awesome. So how can people like find all this cool stuff, learn more about you? Where should they go?
Yeah. So my business is called Magic in Heels.
Love it.
I chose wrong.
No, I like it. You got to like own that shit.
It's good.
Cool.
I just don't like heels.
Yeah. What were you thinking?
I don't know. It should be
You're
magic
like-
in pajamas.
You're like, I wore
just
heels
tired.
once. And then I realized that they hurt my feet.
It was such a good idea, and I bought the domain and then instantly regretted it. It's fine. I've pigeonholed myself. But now I cheat and I wear like boots with big old heels. So
Smart.
Yeah. I put my heel through a stage too many times. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Magic in Heels is my website.com, but also it's all the social medias. And then our tour is called Champions of Magic, and that you can just Google, it'll pop right up. And then Shezam is shazampod.com. And it's Shezam.
Love it.
Because I realize it still sounds like I'm saying Shazam, and then suddenly you wander yourself into a mediocre superhero movie.
Yeah, that's a thing now.
Oh, it is, yeah.
We thought it was a thing with the misremembering thing from the 80s, but it's actually now a thing. No, of course, Shezam, that's the play on words. Get it, guys?
Yes, we did it. Thank you for clarifying.
Of course. Well, Kayla, this has been so much fun.
So great.
Oh my gosh, such a good chat. And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.